Hello everyone. Today we're going to be diving into two separate cases of missing 21-year-old Canadian men that happened decades apart. Both disappeared under mysterious circumstances, and both cases are still unsolved. 21-year-old Dylan Koshman was born April 11th of 1987 to his mother Melanie Alex and his father Dan in Moose Jaw, Saskatchewan. He also had a sister named Tara and a brother named Derek. In 2008, Dylan moved away from home to Edmonton, Alberta, for new experiences and to start to create a life for himself. He even got a job as an apprentice pipe fitter, and he got a new girlfriend who he'd met at a bar. She would describe him as sweet, funny, and shy. While in Edmonton, Dylan had been living in a rented home with his cousins, located in the area of 104th Street and 33rd Avenue. His roommates consisted of his first cousin Colin and Colin's brother Nick, Dylan being the newest member of the house. Now, despite being family, there had been some complaints that the three cousins weren't getting along. Dylan's girlfriend would later say that Colin had an issue with her being over there all the time and hanging out, to the point of asking Dylan to pay more rent for her being around. So in the end, Dylan wasn't really happy with living there anymore, and he was starting to plan to move out. In the early morning of Saturday, October 11th of 2008, an argument would break out between Colin and Dylan. At least two other people were present at this time as well. The initial story went that they had all been drinking pretty heavily for Thanksgiving weekend, and Colin decided it would be a great time to confront Dylan and basically tell him to get out. Well, apparently he didn't tell him very nicely to move out. Instead, he said something along the lines of, "Get your shit and get the hell out." Colin would later tell police that he was scared that he was going to be attacked by Dylan and another cousin. And a fight would eventually break out that involved Dylan being thrown into the stove. According to the cousins, the last time they would see Dylan was around 2 a.m. when he stormed out of the home into the cold winter night in only a t-shirt and jeans. Closer to 3:30 a.m., Dylan's girlfriend attempted to call him because she had plans to possibly come over that night. However, the calls just went to voicemail. Sometime in that same time frame, Dylan would text his brother Derek, sounding desperate, asking him for his phone number. This would be the last contact that Dylan ever made. Around 4 a.m., a neighbor would call 911 reporting a disturbance and a fight happening at the cousin's home, saying, and I quote, "I'm just calling about a public disturbance. It's 4 o'clock in the morning and there are a bunch of guys who are fighting. They're going crazy. They're just crazy. Yelling and shouting and going nuts." End quote. Despite that 911 call, police wouldn't show up until hours later. And when they did go and knock on the cousin's front door, they never answered, so the police just left. All day, Dylan wouldn't respond to anyone, and so late that Saturday evening, the girlfriend began calling and calling the home, until Colin would eventually answer the phone. Colin would tell her that Dylan was not home, and then he would refuse to allow her to come over and pick her belongings up. So Dylan's girlfriend spent the rest of the weekend calling hospitals to see if Dylan had been hurt and was in a hospital somewhere, or if he had been arrested for some reason by the police and he was at a police station. But every single call was a dead end. However, by Tuesday, when Dylan didn't show up to work, the red flags were just getting bigger. So Dylan's girlfriend would then call his brother Derek to let him know that Dylan hadn't showed up to work and he hadn't been heard from all weekend. By October 15th, still no one had heard from Dylan, and so finally his mother Melanie would be let in on the news. Melanie would attempt to call the Edmonton police, however, since she didn't live in the province, they wouldn't let her make a missing persons report, which is absolutely wild to me that that is a rule, or that's allowed to happen. From there, Melanie called Colin and told him to make the report, but according to police, Colin never made that call. So from what I've seen, which let me know if I'm wrong, it was Dylan's girlfriend that would eventually report him missing to police. Melanie and the family would end up traveling all the way to Edmonton, arriving nearly a week since Dylan had last been seen. And they hit the streets immediately, handing out missing persons flyers, setting up a command center, and beginning to search. Meanwhile, police weren't doing anything. Instead, officers would stop by at their command center that they set up themselves and comment on how impressed they were and the effort that they were putting in, and told the family to let them know if they had any new information, as if it wasn't the police's job to find Dylan, but the family's. Around this week mark, police would do some things. I seen that they brought in search dogs, they started searching, but they found no signs of Dylan. They did, however, end up finding his wallet, which contained his IDs and bank cards, in a neighbor's lawn, which is a huge red flag because that means that Dylan didn't have any means to survive, to buy food, to buy shelter, to even travel back home if that's where he wanted to go. But after this, it seems as if police essentially stopped searching, saying they didn't have enough information to even know where to search. And they basically didn't want to waste any resources searching for a needle in a haystack. And because it had been freezing the night that Dylan allegedly walked out of his rented home that he lived at with his cousins into the freezing night in only a t-shirt and jeans, his disappearance was essentially summed up that police thought he possibly just died of exposure and was just somewhere, maybe laying in a ditch. However, unlike some of these disappearances that we talk about, Dylan didn't go missing in a rural area in the middle of the night when it was cold. He disappeared from a suburb in a pretty large city. So you'd think if he had left the home and wandered off somewhere to get away from the situation and died from the elements, he would be found somewhere by a pedestrian or a driver driving by. However, he never was. When interviewed by police, Colin would later give a witness statement where he wrote, and I quote, "On October 10th of 2008, my cousin Dylan brought up my other cousin Cam for the weekend after I expressed I didn't want him to. When Cam showed up, I evicted Dylan and told him to be out of there by the end of the month. I was out drinking with a friend that evening when I was alerted by my brother that they were planning to kick my ass when I got home." End quote. When Colin arrived home early on that morning of October 11th, he wrote, "I confronted them, Dylan and Cameron, and told them to leave. We argued and a fight/wrestling match broke out." Colin went on to write that after the wrestling match ended, they continued to argue, stating that he told Dylan, and I quote, "to get out, he didn't live here anymore, come back and get his stuff later, he left out the back." End quote. According to Nick's statement, he also agreed that he had texted his brother Colin and told him about the plans for him to be beat up, and that after Colin arrived home, he and Dylan, and I quote, "went at it, pushing each other around. They made it to the floor, and Dylan's been throwing punches, and Colin looked like he was going more to restrain Dylan rather than hurt him." End quote. After this, Nick claims he turned around to get a drink, and then he came back to see, and by then, Dylan had left, and Colin said he went out the back. Now, Cameron here would later tell the Fifth Estate that after Dylan left, he grabbed his belongings from Dylan's bedroom in the basement and went out the same door Dylan had left from. And according to Cameron's phone records, someone used Dylan's phone to call Cameron at 3:30 a.m. several times in the span of 1 minute. Cameron says he missed all the calls because he was simultaneously calling 911 to report that he'd been hiding from Colin, whom he alleges was trying to beat him up. It would also be revealed that Nick's girlfriend was the other person at the home that night when this fight happened. I think some of the questions and biggest red flags in this case is Dylan's cousin, namely Colin. It's strange to me that the cousins claim that Dylan left around 2 a.m., yet there was still reports of fighting happening by neighbors in 911 calls that were recorded at 4 a.m. It's made a lot of people think that Dylan did leave, which is when Cameron also left. Dylan tried to make all those phone calls, yet no one was answering, and he was messaging people, no one was answering. And then he possibly realized he didn't have his wallet with him anymore. So then he went back to the house looking for his wallet. And when he went back to the house looking for his wallet, that is when the fight continued until 4 a.m. when police were called. There's a lot of theories that something very nefarious might have happened once Dylan went back to the home. On top of that, when police arrived hours later, why wouldn't Colin answer the door? Also, why wouldn't Colin allow Dylan's girlfriend to come over and get her belongings? Was he possibly hiding something in the house that he didn't want other people to see? On top of that, what makes matters even worse, when Colin's aunt called Dylan's mother days later telling him to report him missing, Colin never did. Why wouldn't you report your cousin missing? You'd think even if they were fighting, days later once he'd sober up, thought about the situation over, you'd think you'd realize, okay, maybe I overreacted, I was drunk, things went too far, and he would have thought, okay, yeah, he's missing, this is bad. But instead, he completely avoided the situation and then didn't report him missing. It's very weird. I also think that he allegedly didn't help search and instead went skydiving. The family has also said that Colin made some very strange comments in front of them and the police, where he said that people go missing in Edmonton all the time and are dumped into construction sites, which everyone at the moment felt very weird about. Like, why would you say that? It was all just very, very fishy. It would take years for Dylan's disappearance to be considered a homicide investigation.
Homicide section is investigating the suspicious circumstances behind Dylan's disappearance. With cases like Dylan's, we often develop a team approach. And what we do when we do a team approach, we blend our investigative team by members from places like Missing Persons Unit, Homicide Section, and Historical Homicide Section. Homicide Section has been involved in Dylan Koshman's missing persons case since 2015. At that time, we were providing direction and advice to the investigators from Missing Persons Unit. We were also reviewing and re-interviewing witnesses. We do this for a reason. We want to make sure that we don't miss anything. We look at it from every angle. We make sure we don't miss any speck of evidence, and the investigation is concluded thoroughly. Recently, there's been a lot of public attention surrounding the surrounding Dylan Koshman's case. This public attention has helped us. It's brought new information, which has helped us further this investigation, and it's also resulting in us revisiting previous investigative tasks and actually re-interviewing other people and people we have in the past. One big thing this new information has made me realize, as well as the other members of the investigative team, how important you are, and when I say you, I mean the media, to this file. Without your help, we will not understand what happened with the Dylan Koshman case and what happened to Dylan. Once again, thank you very much for the attention that you have brought to this investigation. As we all know, missing persons investigations are extremely traumatizing events, as is the case here. Dylan's family have had to endure this for 8.5 years. That's something nobody should have to go through. I myself, as a father of 3, and the members of the investigative team, who are all parents as well, empathize with Dylan's family, and we just want to know that we will strive to the goal of providing them answers as to what happened to Dylan.
And the family thinks Colin knows more than he's saying. I also seen a lot of mention of blood-soaked paper towel rolls being found, and we also have to remember that the neighbor said in the 911 call that people were beating each other. So it's made a lot of people wonder if Dylan being thrown into the stove could have resulted in him dying. Maybe he hit his head, and all of this was covered up. There are just too many strange details and actions taken in this case for me to think that nothing possibly could happen that night that resulted in Dylan dying. Melanie would later say, and I quote, "What we're hoping is that they're still going to be able to reach out to somebody that knows something that can help bring closure to our family. It's devastating to lose a family member or a child, but to not have this closure of burying him or answers as to what happened to him, it's torture." End quote. It's been 15 years since Dylan disappeared, and the family is still fighting for answers.
Melanie Alex and her daughter Tara Koshman are trying to piece together what happened 15 years ago when Dylan Koshman disappeared.
Living this nightmare every day is not easy.
Year after year after year, Alex walks the Edmonton streets taping posters, hoping to scoop any leads on her son.
It's necessary because we need to keep Dylan's face and name out there still, because there's no closure for us.
Koshman was last seen during the early morning of October 11, 2008, leaving his home in the South Edmonton area after getting into an argument with his roommates. He then disappeared without a trace. With little details to go off, Edmonton police say the file status is suspended and will stay that way without any new information, tips, or DNA advancement.
We are basically at the whim of somebody having the information for us.
Tara says they're taking matters into their own hands, hoping these signs will remind nearby residents of that night.
We're just trying to renew interest and gets that spark into this, because we need answers. Nobody just ups and vanishes.
The family has recently connected with Please Bring Me Home, a nonprofit hoping to connect missing people with their loved ones, hoping they can retrace his steps.
Melanie recently connected with Please Bring Me Home, which is a nonprofit organization reconnecting missing people with loved ones or helping solve cold cases. The director of the organization, named Brett Robinson, saying, and I quote, "The investigator of the case has been meeting with family members and anyone else that we deem an important person to speak with in a case like this. Really, it's important to speak with absolutely everyone, though, when you start from the ground up. Time is a very interesting thing. It changes memories, but it also brings forward sometimes memories that maybe you didn't think to pass on. So interviewing and re-interviewing people is a critical part of our process. And again, that takes hours. On many cases, police departments don't have those hours to put in," end quote. Dylan's grandma has already passed away without answers, so if you know something, please say something. This family needs closure, and Dylan needs justice. Dylan is described as a white male standing 5'9" tall, around 190 pounds, with hazel eyes and brown hair. He is said to be deaf in his right ear, has a slight scar in his left cheek and left eyebrows. He also wore earrings on both ears and was last seen wearing jeans, a dark-colored t-shirt, and skateboarding shoes. Dwayne Lavallee was born January 1st of 2003 to his mother Kelly and had at least one sister named Chantel. He was from the Skowhegan First Nation, located in Manitoba. Dwayne was described as a kid at heart and really loved working. He was kind, gentle, and worked hard for everything he had. He loved to hunt and fish, and he was also very, very close with his family. Dwayne was also a very good uncle, who often would buy his nieces and nephews fun toys. In 2018, Dwayne was now 21 years old, and he had just finished a seasonal job and was looking for work. On September 22nd of 2018, around 2 p.m., Dwayne would gas up his vehicle at a gas station located on the Edmonton First Nation, which was situated 180 kilometers northwest of Winnipeg and just over 100 kilometers south of Skowhegan First Nation. This would be the last time that Dwayne would ever be seen again. By September 26th, the RCMP would receive a missing persons report for the 21-year-old. Around that same time, Dwayne's vehicle would end up being found on a dead-end road north of St. Rose de Lac, around 40 kilometers west of Edmonton. This rural road was located off Provincial Road 276. A large-scale ground search along with air search would be conducted for weeks, looking high and low for the missing young man, primarily focusing in areas of the Edmonton area and the area where the vehicle was found. 100 people would eventually be interviewed, and police would continue to say that the investigation was ongoing, however, they wouldn't provide much detail. In the fall of 2018, the family planned to take cadaver dogs out in the fall. Signs would be posted along roads spreading the word on Dwayne's disappearance and calling for tips. A Facebook group would also be created. His mother Kelly posting, and I quote, "Someone knows what happened to my son. Please come forward. This is the sweater he left with from home. He was a loving family person and he got taken from me." End quote. In October of 2018, police would uncover remains but would assure the family that they were not Dwayne's remains and that they thought the remains were around 50 years old. Important evidence would eventually be rumored to have been handed in to the RCMP, and the authorities would ask the family not to post about it on Facebook. Even though these were the first clues in Dwayne's disappearance that had been received in months, as you could see, there's hardly any information on Dwayne's disappearance. He was last seen at that gas station, and that is absolutely it, other than his car being found on that dead-end road, which there are way too many cases that we talk about of people going missing and their vehicles being found on dead-end roads, logging roads in the middle of rural areas. Very, very scary. In the end, the RCMP would not confirm whether the evidence existed or not. But over the years, the families continued to search, and they have been very active on their Facebook about their searches. From the time Dwayne disappeared to 2022, they were out searching land and water, bringing shovels to dig up spots of interest. In 2023, Cane River would be searched, and many other areas would eventually also be searched, yet still there are no answers out there as to what happened to Dwayne or where he is. Every year the family gathers for Dwayne's birthday, and on his 26th birthday, they all gathered once again and they sang happy birthday to him.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Dwayne. Happy birthday to you.
We love you, Dwayne. Love you. We will find you. We miss you.
Now, as people began talking about Dwayne's disappearance on TikTok, some very strange comments began to pop up, such as this one, where a user by the name of RedFlagon86 claimed that Dwayne was killed in Cane River by people police and family had already spoken to. This user also claimed that a girl's jacket should have been left in Dwayne's vehicle who was involved. Dwayne's sister Chantel later sang, and I quote, It's a struggle, but we're getting by. My mom and my dad, their health is not very good, and my grandma helped search right up until she couldn't do it anymore. I think we've come to terms with him being gone. We're not going to accept it at the end because he's not home yet." End quote. Somebody out there knows something. Dwayne's vehicle didn't get to that remote road by itself. And if you know something, please say something. Dwayne's grandmother has also now passed without answers. The rest of the family needs answers as well before they pass. Dwayne is a son, a grandson, a brother, an uncle, a cousin, and a friend to so many people, and they all want answers. They need answers. Dwayne is described as being of Indigenous descent, standing 6'2" tall, around 200 pounds, with 2 visible tattoos, one of a cross on his left hand and the words "can't stop" on his right arm. If you have any information as to what happened to Dylan or Dwayne, please contact the authorities. I'll have the information for each case listed down below. Both of these cases are vastly different, yet vastly similar. Both were young men, 21 years old, who both vanished without a trace. In both cases, there's hardly any evidence or any clues as to what happened to them. And in both cases, it seems like police haven't released much, if they do have anything. And in both cases, family has been fighting for years for answers. Thank you to those who recommended these two cases, and my heart goes out to the families. I truly hope that you get answers and that both Dwayne and Dylan can be brought home. Let me know if any of you know any information that I didn't include here today. Obviously, if it's important information pertaining to the case, please contact the authorities and not just comment it down below. But if you have anything to add, any theories, any information that I just didn't find that I didn't include in today's video, let's chat below. I'll be down there having a conversation with you all. And as always, I hope you all stay safe out there, lock your windows and doors, and I hope to see you in the next video.